On GMS Focus this morning, we will be discussing the recent trilateral meeting between the national security advisors from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, from cooperation in deterring North Korean threats to strengthening economic security. There are plenty of urgent issues on the agenda at the recent meeting in Hawaii. What do we make of the Inflation Reduction Act? What is a joint posture against North Korean threats? For some insight, we're joined by Professor Kim Byung-joo of the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. I think it's worth giving our listeners an overview. National security officials from Korea, U.S., and Japan met in Hawaii last week. What were some of the main objectives of this meeting, Professor Kim?
The meeting took place September 1st, and the event itself was announced a very short time before then. I think it was August 31st, one day before, or something like that. And when it was first announced, the Korean side was saying that it's going to be mostly about the North Korea's possible upcoming nuclear test and how the three allies will prepare for it. And that's the key words that I remember in terms of what was on the top of the announcement. And together with that, I remember South Korean side is going to discuss, I don't like this name as much, but audacious plan towards North Korea. I like to call it grand plan. I mean, audacious doesn't sound totally right. But anyway, the grand plan to help North Korea food and infrastructure-wise once North Korea establishes forthcoming posture on nuclear issues and so on. So South Korean side, Kim Sung-han, the national security advisor for president, was going to have that issue dealt with. And he also said economic security. Some of the items you have already mentioned in the opening. Then he said his counterparts from the United States, Jake Sullivan, the White House National Security Advisor, and then Takeo Akiba, the Japanese counterpart, the Director General of National Security Secretariat for the Prime Minister. They are going to talk about other regional and international cooperation issues and so on. So, of course, as you might have mentioned, it took place in Hawaii, so somewhere in the middle, in between the three countries. And it was first trilateral meeting of national security advisors under the current administrations of Yoon Suk-yeol and Biden and Kishida. So there was a considerable level of interest, if you will, about how this first time trilateral meeting of national security advisors of the three key allies would pan out. So we were closely watching it.
Professor Kim, if you don't mind me asking, I think there's a lot in how these policies are named. Is there a particular reason why you prefer the grand plan as opposed to the audacious plan?
Audacious sounds
it's a bit much.
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of self-congratulatory or something. Like, you don't say what you present as something like I don't know. I think it's just too much play on the words. I think a little bit modest one, like a grand plan or a big plan, would be okay. But if you call your plan audacious, what do you mean? What do you mean? Are you a big dreamer? You're calling yourself the dreamer or something, or what is it? But anyway, maybe I'm just too much linguistically sensitive on that. But anyway.
Perhaps it's lost in translation. I think you raise an important point, and how we brand these plans are also equally important. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Right. Thanks.
Going back to our main discussion topic today, do you see something new in ways the Yoon, Biden, Kishida governments are working together on joint security issues, perhaps not limited to, but including the North Korean issue, economic security, as compared to their predecessors? Yeah,
I think that's an important question. As we look back, I remember at least one such example of trilateral meeting among the three national security advisors of the three countries. That took place April 2021 among Seo-hun at that time, Korea's national security advisor, and the same figure from the United States at that time, Jake Sullivan, same as the one who joined this time in Hawaii. But in Japan, Kitamura Shigeru was at that time NSC chief of Japan, and they met together in Annapolis, in Maryland. Annapolis, Maryland is about, I forget how long it took. He used to drive all the time between Washington and Annapolis, but it's a little bit north of Washington, D.C., and it's a city where the U.S. Naval Academy is located. And in that small, beautiful town, the three of them got together April 2021. At that time, it was interesting dynamics because it was first time since the inauguration of Biden and Moon government at the time from South Korea. It was working hard to kind of repairing the bilateral relationship between Seoul and Tokyo. And of course, Japan remained pretty cool about it, not very receptive. And so many eyes were watching what is it that Jake Sullivan is going to push ahead in terms of how Korea and Japan work better and so on. So the atmosphere was quite different indeed. And so this time I think what we saw was the three participants were much more in line or on the same page than a little bit, relatively speaking, awkward situation that we saw in Annapolis. So in Hawaii meeting, of course, as expected, the atmosphere, relatively speaking, was more cordial and so on. But we do remember, we are being reminded, however, the particularly Seoul-Tokyo cooperation, it still has ways to be geared up because we heard the Japanese response in Hawaii this time also was not as, even though it was better than last time, but not as forthcoming as Seoul would like to see it. So there's still more ways to go, but I guess we're on the track of improving, I suppose.
What can we note in the words of Korea's National Security Advisor, Kim Sung-han, and what he shared with the press?
He mentioned, as he had announced before the meeting, after the meeting he mentioned the North Korean nuclear issue was discussed, but he mentioned the other second topic before the meeting, but he spent a little bit more time on that. That is the advanced technology and supply chain cooperation. And he said that was discussed big time, and along with other issues and so on. But another thing to note was we were told that they had bilateral meetings. Korea-U.S., Korea-Japan, and Japan-U.S. bilaterally they met, also in Hawaii. And of course, with Japan, Korea's Kim Sung-han was talking with his counterpart, Takeo Akiba, about the wartime forced labor issue, which is very, very sensitive and very delicate at this time. They talked about that issue to seek ways to find a better ways out of the current situation. And the Korea-U.S., Jake Sullivan and Kim Sung-han's meeting, they talked about big time the ever controversial Inflation Reduction Act that was introduced, signed by Biden recently, and the CHIPS and Science Act, and so on. So those economic security issue was talked about big time, and that was emphasized in Kim Sung-han's words after the meeting.
Speaking of the very U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, we have to discuss its impact on, of course, the Korean electric vehicles sold in the U.S. without the previously promised cash handouts. Korean-made EVs loses, of course, its competitive edge in the large American market. So first, the background for our listeners, what has happened so far?
Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act, the name, I guess I'm making big deal of this wording this morning.
But it is misleading, isn't it?
It is. Audacious plan. I'm not saying audacious plan is misleading, but yeah, audacious plan and the Inflation Reduction Act. People ask these questions. How does it reduce inflation? I would say It's just largely named, but I'm not clear about whether that's the main point of this new law signed by Biden. Actually, ever since his inauguration, President Biden has been long talking about Build Back Better Act. That's a new legislation he was trying to push through the Congress, and it was blocked by opposition inside his own party. And so rather than the name Build Back Better Act, Inflation Reduction Act is a name of a revised draft of the original plan. And they say it was revised big time. And Inflation Reduction Act, in short form IRA, the IRA, they claim it cuts inflation by reducing fiscal deficit. It's a little bit of detour, the way I see it conceptually. By reducing fiscal deficit, how do you cut inflation? There are ways, but I think we need 2 hours on talking about technicalities on that side. But very important selling point on the side of Biden with the November election coming up, November congressional election coming up. Right. Second point, rather than Inflation Reduction Act, is the lowering of prescription drug prices. And so I guess that means a lot for ordinary American citizens. And then investing in domestic energy production, including not only the energy sources and so on, renewables and all these different things, but also battery side as well. So, and promoting clean energy through that battery side offers some of the problems for Korean automakers, because it's about, when we talk about batteries, and we are talking about electric vehicles, EVs, and Hyundai, Kia, their EVs. We are selling them big time, and I think, in my recollection, Hyundai Kia is number 2 in the United States in terms of how much they sell EVs. Yeah. But now, with this IRA new law in place, what's going to happen is U.S. government is going to offer American buyers of EVs as much as $7,500 subsidies to American buyers who buy EVs produced inside the United States. Okay, so what does that mean? Hyundai, Kia, they will be producing their EVs inside the United States, but not until 2 years from now. Okay, it will. They are setting up their factories in the United
Georgia,
States.
Right?
In Georgia, yes, and now it takes time to finish up this factory, and it's not until 2 years after from now they will be selling these EVs produced in the United States. But until then, what happens? For the next 2 years, Korean Hyundai, Kia EVs sold in the United States will not enjoy $7,500 subsidy from the U.S. government. So automakers like Ford and American, like automobile makers, their EVs will be at least $7,500 cheaper than Hyundai and Kia. And what that means is a huge impact on market share.
Right.
American buyers will buy the American-made EVs, and then they'll look away from Hyundai and Kia. So that is the real problem we face, and it's created a real panic and pandemonium on the side of Korea after the IRA was introduced.
Chairman of the Hyundai Motor Group, Chung Il-sun, just returned to Seoul after his 2-week trip to the U.S. At the time being, little detail is known about his meetings, but bottom line, isn't the only plausible card left for negotiations to maybe complete the construction of the Georgia factories faster than originally planned?
Possibly. But the thing is, this is a material stuff. How fast can you accelerate the process of building the factories? There has to be a certain limit. And as I said, market share is such an important factor. And every day counts. Every day your vehicles are $7,500 more expensive than your competitors, you lose your market share. And how do you recover it? That's a huge challenge in the future. So it looks like a very serious situation.
Professor Kim, what do you make of Korea's responses to this situation? In short, what is your assessment?
The thing is, Minister of Trade and Industry came out talking about taking this case to the WTO for violation. And top government officials talked about this is a violation of U.S.-Korea Korea-U.S. FTA agreement. And the Korean National Assembly came out with a rare bipartisan resolution warning against this IRA's impact on Korean automakers. So everybody has been up in arms. But the thing is, I think how this came out, well, we've been talking about IRA coming in the way for some time, not long time, but we've been hearing about it. But it's only afterwards we came to face these Hyundai Kia issues. These days, my view is this technology driven international relations issues more than anything, the private businesses, Samsung, Hyundai, SK, Korea's key businesses, it's their business, and they have to act quickly. And though in my own personal view, without much information, I feel that Korea's automaker has been taking some time in countering this situation here. So what we need going forward from here is, especially in this day and age of geopolitical, technology-driven competition, each corporations, Korea's leading corporations, they have to take their trade policy side units, divisions, their operations words seriously. I'm quite confident that Korea's automakers must have been hearing words from their Washington office of what was coming up. But there is a chance that they took a little bit longer time in the headquarters here in Korea before they began taking action. So that, I think, needs to be changed. Korea's chip makers, automakers, Korea's advanced technology makers, battery makers, they really have to take their operation on trade policy side, the operation of their business units, and then their political policy units, words and ideas more seriously going forward.
All right. A shift in framework at large. With all that's been discussed today, Professor Kim, what can we learn from the combined cases of last week's Hawaii meeting and the Inflation Reduction Act controversy together?
As I just mentioned now, government and the business cooperation is very important. And the businesses actually own these things these days as the advanced technology becomes such an important issue. So business should lead the government, tell them what they need as quickly as possible, and offer timely, relevant information and insights to the policymakers so that government policymakers can take necessary actions on time. I think that's the most important point here. And even National Security Advisor, being in Hawaii talking about this issue shows that this is a time for in total mobilization, government, business, industry, all acting together to better serve and maximize national interest.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for an insightful conversation as always. Have a safe day. It's going to be incredible rainy. We'll see you next week.
Thanks very much.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.